I had a hard lesson that I learned. It was a couple years ago, and there was a posting coming up in the district, and there was a teacher at the school who was just so dynamic. And she's one of those, like she was a teacher leader, she was a school leader. The other teachers looked to her. She would have the conversations, the hard conversations. And I thought, she is the perfect person for this job. And I went and said, Michelle, I think you should apply. There's a job coming up. You should. And she's, oh no, I don't think so. And I kept saying, Michelle, this is so great. Like you're already doing this job in so many ways. And she's finally, I was kept asking her. And then I even got my other friend to go and say, talk to her and tell her it's great. And then she said, look, I see what you do. I don't want that. And then I thought, wait a minute, because I love this. Like it's hard
Mhm.
and there are hard days.
Mhm.
I love it. And it took me a minute to think, what do I look like when I'm doing this work? Do I look like I'm filled with joy?
So I share that clip with you as just a way to understand my guest, and those of you that know me will see the connection to that last statement. Do I look like I'm filled with joy? And we talk a lot about the way in which we as leaders portray ourselves, and how do we, encourage others to think about leadership. So that quote by Dr. Shannon Behan was really a seminal moment for me in this conversation. But as we continue that conversation, and as you continue to learn more about her journey, travel is a big part of her experience and the way she leads. And, thinking about some of the places that we often point to as being exemplars of how to do education. So what happens when you actually go and live in a country like that? You get to experience it, not just read about it, and then come back and have to apply or consider applying some of those traits. Well, as you'll hear in our conversation, travel's a big part of Shannon's life as well. And I think fascinating how she's taken those lessons from various countries that she served, brought them back to Canada. And sometimes, as you heard, it goes well, and other times it doesn't. But I think navigating that is fascinating. So when we talk a little about travel, we talk a lot about her, again, philosophy. So much energy and so much joy that I had in this conversation. So I know you're going to enjoy this conversation today with Dr. Shannon Behan.
I was selected to be an exchange student. And I was 15 at the time, and I left and I went to Finland, actually. And so I lived there for a year. I was in grade 11, did my grade 11 there. And there for me was the opportunity to really look at the world through a very different lens, meet people from all over the place. And when you're 15, 16 years old, I picked up the language within 3 months, really. I was able to speak Finnish and travel. I met some great friends from Norway, from Iceland, and we traveled all over. And it was a different time where you could just get a train ticket and travel. And you know, there was no cell phones. Nobody was really worried. Probably they should have been because we got up to some shenanigans. But so there was a really just a life opening opportunity for me. So then I came back to BC after that year, finished my high school, went off to university. And then, like I said, after I got my education degree, I was able to get a job outside of Taipei and work there. And there they really loved foreign teachers, especially to be teaching the language. So I had the opportunity to teach primary, elementary, middle school, high school, and in the evening I would teach adults in the business industry how to speak the language. So I just got this whole breadth of experience. And what the biggest thing that I came away with was I really loved teaching. I really loved working with people. I really loved that engagement. And the travel piece, of course, is you're on the back of a motorcycle, zipping down here and there and having these beautiful, exotic opportunities all over the place. And then I came back here to BC and I was working a bit. After quite a few years of teaching, I got into admin. And one of the pieces that was happening in in Powell River District, SD 47 Catholic, which is where I was working at the time, there was an interest in expanding the international department. And so that was part of my next opportunities for travel, which is where I ended up being a principal at a BC offshore school in Beijing. And at the same time that I was working with a lot of international agents, recruiting students for the district, working with so I was actually working for School District 47, living in Beijing, running that school there, that international school of 5,000 students. Don't, but the international department is just a portion of it. And just doing this really fantastic job. And then COVID hit. And I could see really quickly China wasn't really going to be the best place for me. They managed COVID very well. And so, long story short, came back to BC, got a job back here and I was working at a beautiful elementary school, just the most beautiful school. And all my years prior, I had really been working in secondary. So it was a real shift for me being in primary. And I was a little uncertain, like the kids are all wet all the time. There's a lot of tears, there's a lot of body fluids. What I wasn't prepared for is the genuine love and the hugs that they give and the Christmas concerts, which are anything can happen at the drop of a hat. Just that beauty and joy that comes in the elementary years, that I just think if you can experience that, and I always say people always say, what should you do if you're just having a tough day? Go to the kindergarten classes. Go to
Absolutely.
Go to an elementary school. No, you don't need to be on medication. If just go to an elementary school and feel the joy and the love that's there. Yeah, so I was working there, but the international piece, I've been very fortunate in so many ways to see the world, but also to continue looking at education through different lenses. And it really cements my values, my whys for education. I have a strong bias about BC education. I feel like it's a really stellar education system. It's world class. It's dynamic. It's messy. It's complicated, like all other systems for sure. But when you look and see what's like, for example, my most recent international experience really was in China, and they have a very strong memorization and like that strong foundation skills component to their education system. And I've always thought if they can combine that with the creativity, the ingenuity, and the innovation that comes from a Western education, that's where they continue to grow in their strength in education. Yeah. So the value of education, of traveling for me with the education lens is looking to see what I value, what I see works, and combined with.
I was just talking specifically about the value of travel. So those people who travel like you and I, we see the value is evident, right, in terms of how we understand people, understand the world, all of those kind of things. Have you thought about how it has impacted the way that you teach and the way that you view schools? So how does that sort of all of those experiences and that understanding of the world inform you or has informed you as a school leader and as a teacher specifically? You
Mhm.
have any sort of clear takeaways or ways in which that sort of informs how you are and how you when you're in your teaching and learning and leading environment?
It's a good question. I guess what I would say, my first thought is all parents want the same things for their children. They want their children to be educated. They want them to go to a school where they have connection, engagement, and to be educated and have opportunities for the future. It doesn't matter if you're in Taoyuan, if you're in Beijing, if you're in Honolulu, if you're where, it doesn't matter where you are. I was in Delhi not too long ago, it's an emerging system, I would say. I'd call it that. But all parents want the same things for their children. And then the other piece is in the context of being an educator is really understanding your context, your community, the connections. I always say school is a school. What makes it different is the people who come in the door and the values that they bring into the doors of the schools. And so you have to
Mhm.
start with really understanding who the families, the children, who are the people coming into your building every day. I think when I just think about what has happened for me in my own career, I think it's that big piece is everybody wants the same things for their children. And the first piece is like the context of your community is understanding that because you can't do anything if you don't know who
Yeah.
your team is.
Yeah, and I think that resonates, the idea that and I concur in the sense that, listen, things aren't a million miles different in terms of those big things that we want. The nuance or the interest is, as you say, in this individual community, we might come at it in a little different
Yeah.
way, and that's important. even though that might be a small difference when you look at the whole thing, it's a big difference to that kid, that family, that school, because that's how we see the world. That's how we want. But yet, to your point around, we can summarize things. We just want our kids to be happy and healthy and find success and passion and purpose in life. That's pretty, everybody wants that, right? Like how we get there, a little different. We have to take into account the resources we have that's available, the culture that's present. And I think probably you didn't mention it, but your ability to adapt to those varying cultures is easier for you because you've had to do that in your travels. Like you can't be exactly the same way in every place you go because, oh, that's not how we do things here. And
Yeah.
you can adjust to that.
I remember when my first months or so in Beijing, there were some students sleeping on the desk in the daytime. And so I called their parents in and I was trying to come alongside, which is more what we do here in the West is figuring out who they are, what they need. And then I eventually said, and it's again through a translator, I want your child in bed at 8:30 at night, take their cell phones away and their technology, and they need to go to bed on time and they need to get up on time. What they want is the principal or the educator at school to tell them how to parent and guide their parenting, and they listen to it and they respond. But out here in BC or out in the West, if we're going to call parents in and say, I am telling you to do this in terms of, it's not going to work. And
Not gonna work.
no way. And that was one little piece that I was able to dial into is that I had assemblies in Beijing every Monday morning, and the kids would all stand in a row at attention, and the parents would be there. And so we would talk about what's happening in the week ahead, but I would also, as a portion, give parenting advice. And they listened to
Yeah.
it and they followed it. Can you imagine me giving some parenting?
Who are you? What are you doing, lady?
But that's it. You have to dial into who are you, context.
Sure.
And I think that's the beauty of all the school leaders that I see, not only in
Right.
BC, but everywhere, is they can really read the room quickly,
Right.
which
And this goes back to what we were talking about, I think, before we pressed record, in the sense like this is not a judgment to say that's the better way or that's just how they do it. This is how they operate as a culture, and let's adapt to that. That's not wrong to take. There's a definitely higher level of respect for authority, and in fact, as an educator, you must understand things better than I do. So I want to listen to you, and I'll do what you say. As you said, that doesn't fly in Western society in the same degree. It doesn't make one better or worse. That's just the way it is,
Yep.
and we adapt to that.
Yeah.
So the second question that I wanted to ask, that after listening to your share, because I have the same bias that British Columbia education has got something going, and there's something very special. And I think that reputation is not simply self-serving or anything like that. Like people, even across Canada and the work I do, always want to know what's happening in BC. What's going on? Why do you think that is? I don't know that can solve the answer to that because I have vague theories about why BC education is as vibrant and innovative as it is. But what are your sort of thoughts on why is BC education stand out in so many ways?
I know it's such a good question. So when I was doing my doctorate a few years ago now, I was trying to answer that question. I'm going to be very honest. And I was using my experience internationally and trying to answer why do we stand out in the way that we do? I'm not sure. I eventually had to change it because it was going to be a 20-year dissertation and I didn't
Yeah.
get on with things. I just keep thinking it's almost simple is it drills down to the relationships that educators, teachers, principals, staff have with students and families. It's so relational. And I kept thinking, so in my work with international, I was recruiting a lot of students with my whole team to work in districts all over the province. And some students, unbeknownst to us, came with different learning abilities, different learning styles. On the whole, they were very successful, probably 98% successful. And success means graduating, going on to post-secondary. Because the educators that I find have an inherent skill and ability. The teachers can read what's going on for a child, meet them where they're at. They're nimble and quick thinking, and they can really pivot quickly in the classroom to identify the needs of a child, to try to support them in every single way that they have the resources and ability to do. And there was never, for me, a question from the teachers like, why are they here? The question is, what do I need to do? What do I need to change? What do I need to shift? How can we, it's just all, how can we be successful? And the other piece I want to be really clear, it's not like only BC teachers or BC educators think like that, because that's not the
Right.
case. So it's not everybody is apart from that, because that's not the case. I think it's the relational piece. I think that in terms of inclusivity, are we miles ahead? Are we thinking differently about it? As a system right now, even we're asking the really hard questions about truth and reconciliation. And it's almost like we're not afraid to have those messy, hard questions happening in real time in the system. But yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I know that there are a lot of educators who aren't afraid to take risks in their profession. And there is always a place in the system to support that, because that's where your creativity and ingenuity
Right.
comes about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I see it, and from an outsider. You're an insider, so you have one perspective. I'm an outsider. I don't live in BC, but I work so much there that I'm trying to do my own informal dissertation as to
Yeah.
why BC kind of work, because people, so my theories are, I have a number of sort of elements to this. I think you touched on a few. I think the truth and reconciliation is a fascinating one, and I would probably try to, and again, my understanding, and I think that BC has a pretty diverse group of First Nations type people. So that diversity itself means that, oh, we've got all these coastal folks. So they have a very different understanding of sort of land and that experience. Then you have all the people in the interior. Then you have people in the mountains. So the geography, I think, actually lends itself to a greater embracing of diversity, just naturally speaking. And so that, which I think lends to the relationship that citizens have with land, is, I think, more heightened than it is, say, even in the prairies, just because there's people are very much more outdoors. There's embrace that thing. And so there's something there. Again, I don't, people are smarter than I am would be able to extract that. But the other thing I think that has been true, you talked about the innovation that you see in BC, and that's always been a primary driver. And I would probably make the argument that almost everything stems from leadership, and you've been very fortunate to have leaders in key positions, whether it's superintendents or maybe even ministries of education, that have helped drive that. You also, relative, I think, to other provinces, have had less political strife than
Mhm.
other provinces. Like, you live it, so you would probably say there's still yeah, sure there is political strife. I'm not saying there's zero, but it's not as much as it might be in places like Ontario that have had very big shifts in governments. Yours has been a little bit more stable in that, not quite as shifty.
Mhm.
If you so anyway, those are my very, so I don't know if you want to respond to any of those, my armchair quarterback kind of theories that
Well, you know what? And I will say that when you talked about geography, first of all, I did a lot of reading early on in my actually in my undergrad time. And Lawrence Durrell is a writer from bygone era, but he wrote about the spirit of place and how place determines behavior. You think about our schools, you think about our buildings, you
sure.
think about the houses that you build or live in, but space defines how people behave and operate. So I would agree with you as well in terms of the geography of this province and the stability. Like the folks in Ontario also think very, I haven't pinned it down. I have to do some more research about Ontario, but the folks in Ontario think very differently than the folks in BC when it comes to
They do.
education. And I would say it's not combative, but it's a different relationship between ministry and public educators. Whereas we actually, even though we have some struggles, but we have a very collegial relationship with our minister and Ministry of Education. And there's an open dialogue, and they're saying, like, here are the initiatives that are coming through. And they're asking, what are the difficulties? What are the nuances we need to shift? What do we need to change? So there's a different relationship there.
Yeah.
So I would agree.
Yeah, no, that's spot on, I think, too. I think the other challenge is that I think Ontario faces is they have so many overly large school districts
Oh,
that
yes.
operate like businesses. Like Toronto District School Board has whatever it is, 250,000 students. That I don't even know how you like you talked about relationships, right? That is a challenge. When you have an organization that big, you have to run it like a corporation.
Mhm.
It's just out of necessity. You can't and so the relationship side of that, it's not impossible, but it's much more difficult than like you have Surrey, which is the largest school district, which is whatever it is, 75, 80,000 students. That's still a third the size of it.
Right.
And then thinking about when I think about the people that I've known in that role of superintendent, they've all been very focused on relationships and they've done a good job of leading that. So there's your largest district modeling to the rest of the province that this is an important thing. We don't operate like a corporation.
Right.
So that structure, I think, so that I'm just adding another piece to my thesis. So I throw all these out there and I like people like you to respond to them just to see if I'm crazy, am I off of it? But those are my observations that I see all the time.
Yeah, no, I think you're like human beings just they need connection, they need to be seen, they need that's why COVID was so hard for people. And Surrey is a good example. Surrey is a really dynamic, beautiful district. It's so diverse. There are a lot of
Mhm.
new Canadians that come to Surrey, and the leaders, like the principals all the way throughout the system, really see really quickly, okay, who are these people coming in? What do they need? Where are they coming from? What is the culture, the values? And then they pivot really quickly, shift, and try to provide what is needed for the families. And that comes from the entire structure of that district, right? It's not Mark Permain himself that is doing all that work, but he
That's
is
right.
setting the tone for what's needed throughout the district.
Right.
Because I've been
Yeah.
lucky too to spend some time in the Surrey district in my role as president and speaking with their leadership group. And they're just a big family.
Well, and that idea is again that permeates the other districts around there because they look at those folks as leaders. Like you guys, you could do it there, surely. In our district of 10,000 students or whatever that is, that must mean something. And that's what I say. And again, listen, none of us are oblivious to the fact that it's not all perfect. Not everybody gets it. That's what's going to happen. However, as a general sort of theme, as a general kind of culture, these are the things that I think BC just exemplifies so well. So
Yeah.
anyway, I want to talk a little bit more about you specifically. So when you look back, because you mapped out a little bit of your journey there, and I like this question, and it's a hard one, so
Oh,
whatever. But if you were to make like a highlight reel, like the 3 highlights in your career that you say, that's what I would want to capture. That's what I would want people know in terms of where you felt like there was the most impact or the most meaning or however you want to frame that one. But I'm looking for sort of 3 highlights from that you're most proud of in the work that you've done.
okay. Okay. Off the top of my head here, I think it's interesting because they're just when I think about and I would call it maybe the most beautiful times, is I just in my so I was teaching in classrooms for about 10 years or so before I went into school leadership. And the work that I got to do in classes with kids, and I was a high school English and drama teacher is what I did. So I put all the musicals. I was that weird drama teacher. That was who I was. And everybody was a bit extra. But in my English classes, boy, it was rich and it was dynamic. And I love just being with the kids in the classroom. And so there's a highlight for me. And even now, even the kids, and it wasn't all sunshine and strawberries or whatever you say. There was some hard days,
Sure.
tough kids, some moments of, I don't think this is for me. All those, where is this going kind of question. But it's so rich and it's engaging, and I still now, when I don't get to come to Pella very often, but when I do, I see some of the kids who they're adults now. "Oh, Mrs. Behan, I'm" and then they usually say, "I'm so sorry." I'm so sorry. Like, "For what?" "I did this," and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, you did do that, but you're not gonna be defined by how you behaved when you
Right.
were 15, right? You get to grow up. If you're doing that now, I'll have a different conversation with you, but no, you get to grow up." And the second moment, it was a moment where I was vice principal in the high school, and the community here was shifting. It was primarily a pulp and paper mill town. The population was decreasing. And then in the strategic plan, the interest was to grow the international program. I wasn't part of it at that time, but the superintendent at the time had asked me if I could host this small group of 20 or 30 students that were coming. And so I did. And then we were having a conversation late after that. And it was about 2.5, 3 weeks hosting the kids. And I remember, and he was saying, I just have to figure somebody who can lead this. And I remember I hadn't even really thought, I think I had no idea really what I was getting into, but I just said, why don't you let me do it? Just let me do it. And it was one of those kind of life altering moments. And I still remember in the hallway at the high school, and I said, yeah, just let me do it. And then the whole kind of international piece took off. We were recruiting students from 18 different countries. At one point, we had almost 200 kids here, which is big, a large amount for a small community.
Yeah.
Working with host families and then working internationally with agents. I'd be at agent fairs in Hong Kong all of a sudden. And then over the years, we were realizing the dynamics were that this was a little bit of a smaller community for kids who came from if you come from Seoul and then you're in a small community,
Yeah.
it's a bit isolating. There's no
Culture
shock.
shock.
It's a bit of a shock. What we decided to do was open up a campus in downtown Vancouver. So we opened up a satellite campus you're probably familiar with Gastown.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we opened up a campus there, which was an offshoot. So that's what I mean. Like we were able to get really creative. And then as long as I was able to maintain the numbers and ensure the success of the students upon graduating, they get to post-secondary, then we were rolling. And then the opportunity to go to Beijing happened. So that was a real highlight reel for me.
Yeah.
Because also it allowed me to really think on my feet in real time. Okay, what's happening? How can I change things? How do I need to build support for a student in this way? It's so multi-layered dynamics. And I'll tell you the third reel, I feel like I'm living it right now because here I am in this fantastic opportunity, living in Vancouver, helping guide, support, advocate for school leaders and in the province. And I feel like I'll be able to answer the why of that after I process my thinking about 6 or 8 months from now, because it's a 2-year secondment. So July 1st of 2026, I have to dust off my resume. Anyways, that's a different story. But I get to travel all over, not just BC, but Canada. Like I say, I was in Delhi not too long ago and meet people from all over the world, meet people, principals in their schools, here in this province, even going to Haida Gwaii for a week and looking at what's happening there. The culture of the 4 very nuanced communities is very different all throughout Haida Gwaii, and thinking about what are the leaders doing in each of those communities to make sure there's community engagement and focus on outcomes for kids. And going to Niska, which is a really dynamic place. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to go to Niska. Well, again,
Mhm.
just a really brilliant place that's geographically quite remote and figuring out what's happening there. And then it's not too long ago, I was in Ottawa for the Canadian Association of Principals. And so then at those meetings, you just get to hear what's happening for leaders in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, their vision of school leadership. And I have my reflections on that. So I feel like my third highlight reel is the show isn't over yet.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
And I want I feel, and you may agree with this too, that really principals, school leadership, uh, essentially are the linchpin to success of education. If they don't get it right, it's very difficult to do anything else. And as much as superintendents and that sort of side of it are really important part of it too, I just feel like that is a significant piece that in many cases hasn't gotten the support and attention that perhaps they need. So, if that's true, what do you think is the biggest thing that principals and vice principals, again, you got a magic wand now, and money, anything else is unlimited to what you could do. What is it that they need right now that's going to help them? And again, we recognize they're all individuals. They might have different individual needs and strengths and weaknesses and so forth. But as systemically, what do principals and vice principals need the most right now?
So first of all, I will agree with you that in the system, just so to share my thinking, in the system, everybody plays a really important part. The people that are the most center of the system are your school principals and vice principals. And I would say your school principals more so just because the vice principals have usually different roles and responsibilities.
Right.
So if you want to impact change, that is where it's going to happen. The ministry will put out initiatives. The senior superintendents and senior leads will try to shape them for the context of the district. And the rollout comes with your school principals. So I just want to say, yes, I agree with you. That's the greatest place where you can impact change. And so, yes. What do they need? Classrooms are very complex places now. And I think they are more complex than they used to be. And I'm not, what's the matter with kids today? I'm not of that ilk, but it's just more complicated in classrooms than it used to be. And the initiatives that are coming in here in BC through the ministry, our food programs, our childcare programs, before and after school care, our literacy initiatives, our early, what do you call it? Early assessments for literacy, our numeracy work that probably is going to be pushing in soon. And then all the work that is all, and they're all right initiatives, all the work about social emotional learning, mental health. Schools are now the new churches of most communities because
That's right.
that's where families go to for almost everything and where educators look out for families for everything, food, shelter, clothing, everything. So what we need is, yes, these are all the right initiatives to be having in schools, but the infrastructure hasn't quite followed up to meet those needs. So continuing to put the initiatives in through schools, yes, that's right. Build in the additional scaffolding that's needed. So if I had a magic wand, it would almost be like your school is the central hub of your community, and peripheral to that is also your maybe a social worker in each school, like a school medical officer, or you'd have all of those things connected to your school because at while you're being an educational leader, you're also sometimes cleaning up vomit. That's your principal is doing those things at the same time. So I think the system needs principals just need more support to offload the things that don't serve as they're not their maybe primary. Like I remember trying to fix plumbing at the school here. It's not your best skill set and not the best use of your time. So magic wand, just increase that infrastructure because the other piece that we're seeing is a lot of principals on leave or going on
Yeah.
leave. And they're saying this is too much.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think to add to that, I would say that for many principals who go into that role are being asked to do things that they weren't being asked to do when they started or when what they thought the job was. And I think about that idea of the school as the hub, and when I think about I've got a couple principals in my head who I think have been really good at that. The one thing that they've brought to that it just their intuitive nature, whatever. I don't know if they're ever taught that, is their ability to manage these disparate institutions and organizations. Like you've got to talk to the mental health people. You have a relationship with the police. You have a relationship with these people, and you know how to have them work. They basically built their own infrastructure that you're talking about
Yes.
just because they have an exceptional skill set to manage that and recognize that's my job. Like I have to figure this out. That is my priority. They've also done things like I'm thinking of a particular principal in Winnipeg who knows how to go to the local car dealership to say, you need to spend money on getting books for all of my kindergarten and grade one, doing those extra things that cause yeah, put your money that's nobody teaches that. Nobody says, oh, in the book of learning how to be a principal, you have to deal with all of these people that aren't even have nothing to do with
Education.
on the surface, anything to do with the school, but yet they are now as the school changes its position, you got to be able to navigate that kind of thing. So I think we're on to something there around
Yeah.
that skill set and the infrastructure to support them to do that kind of work.
When I was in New West, there's a high school and I think maybe they have about 2,000 students, but
Yeah, it's the biggest high school that's a weird combination because New West is a relatively small
yeah.
school district, but has the largest high school in the province.
But they have their immigration kind of intake, not for the district, but for the community connected to that.
Right.
And they have doctor and that comes to the school. So it's really, for me, it's a good example of that kind of hub of thinking. And the other piece that as I've gone around the province, one of the initiatives is to upgrade our schools and build new schools. And that's great. Some of these schools are from 1970. They are a little bit old, outdated, maybe not earthquake proof or that kind of thing. So it's all a good initiative. But as I go around, the principal is taking me on the tour and they are talking about, they're picking swatch colors or they're talking about the architecture of where the library is going to go. So they're running their schools. And at the same time as they're not hammer and nails, they're not far off. And actually it was again in New West. There was a school that was being added on to there. And I went to visit the principal. And so it was a kind of a medium-sized elementary school. And then at the back, they're building on. So the welders are there and the children and the school are there. And then I said, I'm not sure. Like, I think you're not supposed to look at the welding sparks. And she said, oh, and so this is the principal running over to find the construction folks and
Maths.
say, I'm supposed you could do something about that. And then because in New West, on the side of that school, they have taken away some of the play area for the kids, but beside it is a city park. So the kids can use the city park at the same time. But what she has to do in the morning is go over to the city park and let the folks who sleep there in the nighttime know, if you guys could move on, school is going to start. That's what I
Right.
mean about being like many principals like myself. I would go to school, I would see who's sick today, who's coming in today, who are my needy peeps that I think are going to be that I need to look out for today. But with her, I feel like her name was Sarah. She would go out and just make sure that the folks who,
Yeah.
you need to get on. And the police were really good to help and that kind of, but that's what I mean. These initiatives coming
Oh
in.
yeah.
And then you're also a construction person.
And we are trying to work towards helping teachers navigate a new reality of being able to handle some of these, whether it's inclusion or other things of that nature that like weren't necessarily part of what they signed up for, as you might say. We paid more attention to that, which is good, but I think that's where principals are lacking because I don't know that they're getting that this new reality for them has been supported in the way that it needs to. And I'm sure there's again examples of where it has, but I would say systemically we haven't done that for principals. That's such a big thing. Next question I have is around just leadership in general, because I think we desperately need more leaders. And as we've talked about, and I don't know that everybody's as anxious to be a leader as they might have been when we were starting our careers. So
Yeah.
there may be a crisis of leadership. I sometimes think there is, but what advice would you give to a young person right now? So you're wandering around schools, you're meeting different teachers or whatever who are curious about maybe taking on a leadership role, maybe becoming a principal. What would you
Mhm.
say to them in terms of here's what you should be thinking about if indeed you choose to take that next step and become and want to take a leadership role? What advice would you give that young person?
It was funny. It was like a hard lesson that I learned. It was a couple years ago and there was a posting coming up in the district and there was a teacher at the school who was just so dynamic. And she's one of those, like she was a teacher leader. She was a school leader. The other teachers looked to her. She would have the conversations, the hard conversations. And I thought she is the perfect person for this job. And I went and said, Michelle, I think you should apply. There's a job coming up. You should. And she's, oh no, I don't think so. And I kept saying, Michelle, this is so great. Like you're already doing this job in so many ways. And she's finally, I was kept asking her. And then I even got my other friend to go and say, talk to her and tell her it's great. And then she said, look, I see what you do. I don't want that. And then I thought, "Oh, wait a minute, because I love this. Like it's hard
Mhm.
and there are hard days.
Mhm.
I love it. And it took me a minute to think, what do I look like when I'm doing this work? Do I look like I'm filled with joy? And I don't mean like,
Oh, I love that. I love this answer so much. Finish, please.
yeah,
I love it.
it was a bit of a hold up the mirror to myself. And I thought, you know what? I love this. I also need to share that joy with other people. So that's one. And then there is a conversation out there about our younger teachers coming in. They want work-life balance. I'm not sure it exists, right? My dissertation, I was studying superintendents in BC. That was the female leadership in the province of British Columbia. And that work-life balance, you actually have to really work at. If you have to create the infrastructure in your life, and if you need somebody, it comes to simple things like hire somebody to make your dinners or the childcare issue is an issue because I'm talking about female leaders too. I've
Yeah.
got
Yep. Yep.
but The other piece is for me, there were a few key people in my life. Find some mentors. Mentors, not only in your district, outside of your district. I've been very fortunate that I've had a lot of people in my community, outside of my community, my extended family, who have provided kind of mentorship and guidance throughout my career. Build your team of people, and not just people who will tell you what you want to hear. Build those, what is it? It's like somebody who will hold up the lens to,
Critical friend.
like critical friend. Build your team of critical friends. I would say that. Like through our association, we offer programs. One is Aspiring Leaders, which we'll start delivering in January for teachers who are curious and maybe interested. Take advantage of programs like that. And it's delivered by currently serving leaders, but it's all currently serving teachers who will take a program like that. They'll get some insight into the work. What are some other things I would say if you're interested? If you're interested, jump at it. And it's just like you say about a friend who maybe goes to Korea and is worried you don't like it. If you get into admin and you don't like it, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
It's not,
You learn something.
yeah,
You learn something.
and then you move on and it's not, you're not floundering. What else would I say? Let me just think. I would say later on in your career, start really understanding about board, how a board works, how boards work, and those processes, policies. But I would think starting off, if you're curious, take a course like Aspiring Leaders, depending on what's happening in other jurisdictions. That's what we offered here. Start connecting, build your team, find mentors. That's where I would say people would start, because it's not easy, but it's a very rich and rewarding career.
But that very first thing you said, why I got so excited about that is because I've been talking about that for a long time. And that is, as leaders like yourself who do really enjoy and love your job, even though it can be difficult, even though it doesn't mean it's easy and fun all the time. But how you model that to other people is so important, because I remember as a young teacher, I would look at principals and sometimes I would say, oh, I'd love her job. Like, she looks like she's having fun.
Yeah.
And that's what got me excited about it, is that looks like a fun job to do. And once you get behind the scenes, you realize it's not always fun. It's like that, but that was never the point of it. Is the point that you're modeling. I think that's what I would say, especially now to our leaders that are in place. We need to do a better job. Those of us who are in leadership positions that are actually finding joy and purpose and value, we need to do a better job of being more explicit with what that looks like, whether that's the looks on our faces, the things we say, the things we choose to talk about, and the way we let people, like when I think about that work-life balance piece, even, which again is sometimes a weird thing, because I don't know that it's numerical in any way, but I think when you can put things in perspective, yeah, it's hard, but it's not the end of the world. Like, kids aren't, for the most part, no one's dying as a result of it. So it's not life and death situations all the time, even though some are challenging. We can bring some levity to it when that is what's required, just to take the temperature down, because we work in environments where sometimes people are very heated over things. When you step back, you go like, whether a kid cheats on an exam or whatever, like, I get it. But it's not the end of the world. Let's not make everything so critical, because there are things that are critical in life, no doubt about it. But there's a lot of things that we do on a daily basis where if it doesn't go quite perfectly, if it's not exactly right, we'll figure it out. And so, anyway, I'm so glad you said that, because I really do believe that if we want to foster more leaders in us, we have to demonstrate to the young people that leadership is something worth doing, and teaching is worth doing, right? So how do we get those kids that are in grade 11 and 12 to look at their high school teachers and say, I want their job. Like, they look like they're enjoying it. And I don't know that, like, what is our then the question becomes, what's the obligation for teachers and leaders to recruit more leaders and teachers because of the way we act? I think that's a conversation that we need to be having much more intentionally as a system, because I think 5 years from now, we want to make sure that we have great new teachers and great new leaders.
Yeah.
So at any rate.
Yeah. No, I love that. I do. I love it. Yeah.
Okay. Last question, then I got some quick ones to get you out of here. So the last question, hard one.
Okay.
I know. You got to pick one person, not 5, not 3, one person that today, and it could be for whatever reason, that you're choosing to give a shout out that you're grateful for today? And again, I know there's many, but I'm just asking you to pick one today.
One,
Yes, just one.
I'm grateful for so many.
I know that.
Oh my golly, this is a hard question.
I know it is. It's supposed to be hard. Not everything
Oh,
has to be easy.
grateful for so many. I will say this is terrible too because I have two children, and if I say I'm grateful for one, then that's bad business. But I'm grateful for both of them in different ways. I would say I look back to my grade 5 teacher, Miss O'Hara, and I went to a Catholic school, and Miss O'Hara was the first, what do you call it? Not she wasn't a nun, teacher that I had. And it was just she was from Vancouver. She just brought a whole wealth of she had a like a typical joy, and she was like a typical person, and she was a young single lady, and she loved what she was doing. And I think I'm grateful for that because I don't think I had a real connection to school or learning. I like to read and do that kind of stuff, but I didn't really have a connection to engagement in school. And I think she maybe opened up the light for me on that one. I'd say Miss O'Hara from grade 5. I don't know
I
where
like
she's at
that.
right now, so I would go with her.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think what I think about when you tell a story like that is what I like to say sometimes. One of the best things that you can do for your students is to be an interesting person. And that's what it sounds like she was for you. Somebody that was not a little bit outside the norm, had some different life experiences that she brought that said, "Oh, this is a person that that's making me." So anyway, I love that one. All right. 3 quick questions to get you out. What are you reading today?
Okay, so I'm one of those people that has about 3 or 4 different books on the go at the time.
Sure.
Right now, I've got Bridge of Sighs. I don't know. It's a good little novelty read. I am a diehard Brene Brown fan. So I've got Brene Brown Strong Foundation. I've got that one on the go. And then because I'm always interested about curating creativity, I'm The Artist's Way. It comes along with a little bit of a workbook too, and it's about how to curate and creativity in yourself and in others. So I've got that on the
Nice.
go. I've got a few others, but I'll leave it at those 3. And I
Okay.
read them
What
in
about
pieces. Yeah.
what about from a like little guilty pleasure, binge watch? I just want to escape. I don't want to, I'm going to shut my brain off. So what are you watching or consuming that in that currently or recently?
Okay. I watched Landman. Have you ever seen that one?
Don't have Paramount, but want to get that one because I'm a big Billy Bob Thornton
Yes.
fan.
Yeah, I really, even though I think that I shouldn't tell other people that I really, because it's a curious show, but I don't know, it's really great. I'm really enjoying that one. I don't watch a lot of TV because I'm always floating around, and so I have a TV, but I haven't turned it on for a long time. But I do watch that on my laptop. And then I was a Yellowstone fan. That's over and
Okay.
gone with
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a conversation with myself later too, because I get into what's going on in America in politics. And sometimes I feel like I just want to get some popcorn and watch. And then sometimes I feel like, no, you should step away. This isn't actually good for you. And I worry because it's happening in real life time for people there. And it's shocking. And
It's shocking, but am I supposed to laugh? Is this entertainment? Because sometimes it presents itself as just
yes,
entertainment. Then you realize, as you said, oh no, but this is real, but
yes,
it's so dumb.
yes. And so
And
sometimes I have a
yeah,
difficult relationship with watching what's happening in American politics, but I do sometimes
yeah.
watch too much all the time. Which
All
is
right, last question, and you can take this as a Vancouver native or a Powell River resident as well. So wherever you want to go. But I'm always looking for a hidden gem.
cool.
So in a place that it could be a restaurant, it could be a park, it could be just something that if I did a search, it says things to do in Vancouver, things to do in Powell River, it probably wouldn't come up at the top, but it's just something that as a local, you would share as hey, here's an insider's tip as to a place to visit, eat at, whatever place you want. So what's your insider's tip?
Right off the top of my head, I'm an outside cat. I like to go outside and play. And there's a lake. And it probably, if you looked, maybe it would come up in Powell River. But there's a lake, Inland Lake, and there's this beautiful trail meandering all around the lake. And I would say pack a lunch. And I usually try to run it when I'm here. But I just think going outside around the lake, it's just a beautiful trail. The scenery is stunning. Sometimes you'll see bears. That's always at the top of my list. Whenever I am in town, I just make sure I hit Inland Lake. And in my darker moments of work, if I'm stuck someplace, I'm at an airport, I just think, oh, it's going to be so nice. I'll be running around Inland Lake at some point. So without hands down, that's, I would say, my favorite. I don't know. Did you get a chance to play when you were in Pullover? Or was it mostly?
Not long enough. No,
Yeah.
he took me downtown. We had a nice little dinner out overlooking the bay there and so forth, and did a little drive around. But I need to come back and explore more.
Yeah. And if you do, let me know, because there's also a beautiful lake and we can take the boat and zip up the lake. There are cabins that are floating on the lake, quite isolated, where you can sit and just let the world go by for a little bit. Yes. That's what I
Lovely.
would say.
Thank you so much for your time today and just a lovely conversation. And I've enjoyed following the work you do, and especially with BC principals, vice principals now, and want to thank you for that work and continue success there. And maybe we'll cross paths in person and grab a bite or a drink or whatever.